are data products? Data products are really contracts for data that are needed by business teams and data customers. If you're familiar with data mesh, this is actually completely correlated with the terminology that they're using there. So we're not making up anything new here. Business data consumers, meaning business folks that use data to make decisions, use data products to do all sorts of things, improve their processes, gain insight into the markets, into their products, generate value. And they serve both external and internal customers, especially in the data mesh world. You've got domain within your business that can share data products. And the idea is that we're going to be able to unlock the potential of data to actually directly drive quantifiable economic benefits for the business. And that's really what becoming a data-driven business is all about. What we're going to discover with data products here, though, is that they are actually like building blocks. They can be used internally, but they can also be delivered externally. And these building blocks, data products as building blocks, is a key part to actually how you deliver value. So hopefully we'll bring that to life today.
So Michael, there's data products and data pipelines. How are they the same thing? Maybe explaining the difference between those will help the audience.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into that a little bit later, but the idea is that you're using data pipelines to produce data products. So the pipelines are like a factory, right? They're the mechanisms and the engine that actually creates the data product. And at the end of data pipelines is the thing that you get to call a data product. That's where the contract sits. So yeah,
Right.
good question. I think we're going to touch on that a couple more times. Let's start out with this picture that I used yesterday in another presentation, in a data integrity presentation, where you got your business insights, where business users are using data to make decisions, right? They've got reports, they've got dashboards, maybe they're doing machine learning models to do forecasting, data warehouses that are slicing and dicing it, right? So the kind of tools that you use in business insights are decoupled from the source systems where that data is actually coming from. And so a lot of times what data engineering teams are doing is they're connecting that, right? They're delivering on a report, say, and then going and getting the data for that report and stitching it together and then presenting that report. So that's a very common pattern where each one of these reports or data warehouses or are kind of a project that's taken on by an engineering team. And what we've seen, and a lot of our customers here have seen in the past before they found Ascend, is that really turns into a hodgepodge of code and pipelines and staging systems and tables. And it turns into a real mess that becomes unmanageable pretty quickly. And as a result, people are getting inconsistent data, right? Data that's coming from exactly the same source systems to feed one report is inconsistent from the data that's coming from exactly the same systems and feeding a dashboard, say. So they have these divergent things because they have different mechanisms feeding them. But the idea with data product is that we introduce this abstraction here that actually defines what it is that the data engineering teams deliver. So what's the benefit of this, right? We looked into that. This is also really useful mechanism if you're thinking about monetizing your data. And I bring that up because we actually have quite a few customers that use Ascend to create data products for their customers. And so they actually sell and monetize data. And so this data products idea is very, very useful for that because now you can actually tie revenue potentially to these data products. So yeah, so these data products are contracts. So what do we mean by that? When we mean, yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Well, I was going to ask you, so you have these data products, right? It makes sense to have this like extract layer and you have these different formats that you could potentially write out. Can you talk a little bit about that consistency of data if you have like large organizations with multiple BI teams or places you have to put the data? How does the data products benefit a very complex organization like that?
Yeah. You know, and you see this all the time, Alex, when you're working with customers. There's different groups that need data in different formats, right? Maybe they need a CSV file to pull it into a machine learning platform, or they need it as an Excel spreadsheet to render into a report because they're using Excel to do reporting, et cetera. The key is that you're using a contract to actually define the things that all these things have in common. And then you might have different flavors of delivering that, data to each of those business users. And the cool thing about Ascend is you can actually do that. You can define and deliver a data pipeline with the data product. And at the very end, using our write connectors, you can deliver that exact data set and keep it in sync across these different formats.
Excellent. I mean, and that's one of the key benefits, right? Is being able to ensure that the consistency of that data used by different teams, they don't get different results, right? Depending on if it's common data that all of them use, but they have different tools at the end or different systems are feeding, you can make sure that it's coming from that data product and have that contract. So it all makes perfect sense. I think that's great value.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to get into an example just to really bring this to life, what this contract, how it can operate. But we do have a definition here, for example, like what is this data contract or data product actually look like? And one of the things that our customers keep telling us is that it's really important for the business user to participate in defining this data product, right? Even though you're no longer defining the actual report or the actual widget or the actual model, you're defining a product that feeds that. You still need your business users to participate in and define what it is they actually want. So front and center for a data product is like, what business problem does that data actually solve? But then you do get into what we just talked about, which is like, what is the physical format for that data set? And there could be several, depending on how many people are using it. And then what technology are they using to access that data product, right? Are they using a BI tool? Are they using a report engine? Are they using a website? They might even be using an application to pull data, a data product into their workflow. It's good to know that as you're defining the data product so that the data product can meet all those needs. Also, like how often are these data products updated? Some are pretty stable. A lot of financial data products within the company are often pretty stable, like sales forecasts and things like that. But others can be super dynamic, especially in the world of marketing, sales, and yeah, they can change quite a bit. You want to know that as part of your product definition is like we update this thing every month. So the engineers can get ready to design the data product to be updatable and manageable. And then how often, like how do you actually tell your downstream data consumers that it's something's changed? What alerting do you have? What notification mechanisms do you have that they can pay attention to? And then what technology are you using to secure that data product, both throughout the life cycle and also at the very end? So they need to authenticate to get at that product. And then what are the data structures inside those data sets? Is it Parquet? Is it tables? Is it a data warehouse? So you want to get down to the brass tacks. What exactly are the columns? What exactly are the fields in the data set? And then it's also really interesting to know that, like, does money change hand for using this data product? We talked about, so a lot of business models actually sell data products. That's an obvious one. But you might want to start doing chargebacks, right? If these are complex data products to produce and they cost money to run, like looking downstream and saying, so where's the value? Are there chargeback mechanisms that express the value of that data product at that point of the organization? That can be an interesting conversation and help drive the adoption of the data product as well. So finally, like any product, what does customer delight look like? And this puts you back on who's actually the business user that's using that product. You always want to get back to that principle that they're the ones who are helping define this data product as much as possible.
Oh, and what we've seen at customers, right? They have something that might be called a business requirement or a pipeline requirement doc, right? You kind of create that. It's kind of taking, and you'll talk a little bit about how you kind of take that and just kind of think about it a little bit differently and how it applies to a product versus a pipeline or, a flow. So it's great. I think this lines up really well with what we're doing in Rapid Start as well, right? Where we talk about these contracts and making sure that you have a data product requirement. So we can start to talk and teach our customers kind of a consistent way as well. So this is great.
Yeah, it maps directly to the practices that we can recommend. And actually, we do this stuff ourselves, to your point, right? We actually do this internally and with our customers. Yeah. So one of the things that comes out of this is, like we talked about the data product, there's actually kind of a mindset around data as a product. We published 2 articles on this. So I recommend you go to our blog and find these 2 articles, one data product and data as a product, that are related to exactly this topic. And what happens here is that, yes, okay, you agree that you're going to treat the data as a product. Right? We just talked about using these contracts as an intentional approach and how that helps focus the data team to produce valuable data products. Okay, good so far. The thing that happens next with this mindset is that, to what you just started talking about, like what does the pipeline look like that delivers data products? It ripples back into that conversation, into a very technical and engineering oriented conversation, to what data exists and where does it exist to meet the needs of this product, right? So this turns the equation around. We see a lot of data engineering teams looking at the sources first, like, hey, we have 100 sources. We need to connect to them all. This helps you triage that whole problem and say, okay, what are we going to deliver first? What's the first data product that we can contract for? And then go and find those 5 sources, 6 sources
Yeah.
that you actually need.
Yeah. I hear that from every customer, I think, right? Here's the 100 sources, or here's the sources. How do we get this data in there? And you get it in, and that's great. And that's a first step. But do you have the data? Do you have the right data? Do you need 50 of those, not 100? Like what is that product that you're trying to present? It's kind of, you know, looking at it from the end user's perspective versus what do I have available to push forward. So definitely a good concept.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is that actually opens up a conversation around who is using the data, and you might have multiple people using that, starting to use that same data product. To the example that you talked about before,
Or no one
and
using it.
or no one using it.
Then you're
Why are we
wondering,
doing this?
why are we doing this? Exactly.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so looking at these, like where's the data coming from, where's it flowing to, it starts to get into that engineering conversation, and you're having kind of a very targeted engineering conversation that's solving the problem more tactically. So now, as an engineering team, I get to go and look at, oh, so where and how does this data change? Right? But you're staying focused within the lens of data product, not how theoretically and abstractly are the thousand ways that data can change or boil the ocean. No, just like, well, this data product, what's happening? Let's solve that. And then ultimately, like, how's it being used by the data consumer? Right back to what's in the requirements, coming back into the engineering conversation. Yeah, so we're echoing a lot of, I just wanted to little shout out for a session that we did yesterday around data integrity. There's a lot of similarity here, but we're talking about data products more generally. In that session, we talked about the trustworthiness of data products. So it actually just maps directly back onto that conversation as well. So check that out. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about that on our storyline here, where we have these data products, right? And you have an engineering team that's looking at how to deliver that data product. Now you have the data intelligent pipelines story come in to, like, how are you delivering data product? You can use intelligent pipelines. What's interesting about intelligent data pipelines is you can actually take that data product concept a little bit further upstream in the data stream and define these interim products. And we'll go through an example to maybe touch on some of this, but interim products are interim data sets that the engineers want to reuse. Like, for example, the weather forecast for the next month, because you're doing sale projections of weather related products. You can have an interim product called the weather forecast that everybody uses, right? So we don't have divergence on that, but it's an input to lots of other products and ultimately to data products that are driven by that particular input. And on its end, what's cool is you can actually build separate pipelines for each one of these interim products and hook them together, right? There's a whole bunch of things about intelligent data pipelines that suddenly spring to life, where, like, if you take this approach, now you're no longer boiling the ocean, you're getting things done with a lot of automation, versus the other approach where everything's bespoke, right? There's just you're answering individual questions and having huge engineering efforts building bespoke things. Yeah, so I actually put in an example here to kind of bring this to life. Let's say, for example, that the tax team needs a forecast, needs to look at how many customers are going to move across state lines next year and in what states, so they can estimate state sales taxes, sales tax obligations for next year, so they can, pay their monthly obligations, right? They start budgeting that and putting those in place. So it's a pretty big problem. And all they need is really just like trend lines. They want to report in each of the states, like, how are those populations moving, so that they can follow those customers. Great. And say, since it's just a bespoke little requirement, they're like, look, just give me a CSV file so I can, plug that into my Excel spreadsheet that tells me the answer. Cool. Great. But the engineering team now is taking a data product approach and saying, what else can we do with this? And sure enough, they find that the customer support team likes to also know this information, so they can think about where the customer support calls are coming from and drive staffing for the customer support organization, which may include field service, for example. And they're like, yeah, okay, give it to us as a spreadsheet, because that's what we distribute internally. But now the engineering team is going, hey, now hold on a minute. You guys both want the same thing. How about we actually create a database? So everybody can slice and dice that data, but it's going to have this information in it. And both of them, like, oh, that's great. Yeah, I love slicing and dicing, right? I don't have to do that in my BI tool now. I can do this in this data mart. Fantastic. Great. Somebody else gets a wind of this. So first of all, you should recognize here now that the business insights are separate from the data product, right? Engineering team's going to deliver this data mart, and the business insights are driven by the product owner inside the business. So another team gets the wind of this. It's the product marketing team. They believe that there's a correlation between increased need for baby-related products when families move across state lines, because there's a compelling event in their lives, and there's a correlation, right? So they think there's an opportunity to target customers that are moving across state lines with family-related products, but they need to do this very smartly, right? They have an ML model, this little brain thing is a model, and their modeling engine takes in Parquet files. So that's just the way that thing is built. But they're coming to a conversation and saying, I want this exact same data, but can you go get it to me in a Parquet file? And now you can negotiate with them and say, you know what, we're going to build a data mart for this thing. Can you pull your Parquets, out of the data mart? And generally that answer is very easily yes. Or to your comment earlier, Alex, we can actually, send, you can actually push that, keep all those destinations in sync and make it even easier for the business users to do their thing. So that takes out that data product back to a single data product. So now you're consolidating all this demand and all this business value around the data product that's now extremely valuable, right? And it's worth investing properly in. It's worth using intelligent pipelines to deliver that product. And we're back to the intelligent data pipelines to deliver that. Just to connect the dots to the narrative over on trustworthy and data integrity, like that actually helps drive trustworthy data products if you have like a methodology around it.
I love the way you explain that. I mean, it makes sense. I think customers will get it, but it is going to be a change from what they're used to. So we have to continue to educate and hopefully get people to look at the value of something like this versus copying things. And, you start to get this unwieldy type thing that you develop and some thought put into it in a structure like this. Outstanding.
I think the hard part here is if you already have, a lot of old, like how do you get to the new?
Yeah.
Those transitions are pretty hard. I know
Yeah.
you are operating programs to help customers with that, but it's nice to draw this on the board, explain it, people get it, but then actually doing it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not trivial.
Yep.
Cool. Well, let's recap a little bit. Like to your point, like what are the business benefits that you want to be able to anchor on as you make this shift in methodology inside your company and how you're, becoming more and more data driven. You're increasing the trustworthiness of your data. Like you're getting great aligned business units across your business, right? Let's make sure we keep those front and center. One of the things actually what happens is that you actually end up being able to differentiate your company's offerings, especially if you're a data company. If you become data product driven, those data products can be very, very rich and very stable and trustworthy. That really changes the way the company operates and can really ultimately affect what the company actually does in the market. It also provides a lot of transparency to all the business users across the enterprise, especially if they're reusing data products, like instead of everybody just in their own little corner, now you're sharing data. You're talking about the business value of the data. What you're going to talk about next is actually really key to create that transparency. Repeatability and reliability, absolutely key components of creating trustworthy data, obviously. Talk about that in the other session. And moving everybody towards, trusted data and making great decisions. One of the things that comes out of this, I think you'll talk a little bit about this as well, Alex, is like defining and measuring success with data. Because now you have a value chain, right? There's a transparent value chain. All these data products hang together, what they're driving, what business value they're creating. Now you can actually see what the impact is, what the business impact is. And then last but not least is enabling this data stewardship and data ownership. Like the business can absolutely wrap their heads around and engage around this data product contract concept. They love it. They'll dig right in. If you approach them with like 100 source systems, and lots of code and should I merge this with that? They check out. They don't have the time for that. So it creates this very nice interface between the business need and the engineering capabilities. That's it.
Awesome.
It's over to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks for that. And so the next thing we're going to talk about is the data catalog. So we've talked about the data products. Now we have to talk about how we, for lack of a better word, inventory it, right? How do you get that list of data products so you can manage that? Once you have this catalog, you can provide other key organizational information, who owns it, right? Which is a big deal, right? Because if you have a product and one of those interim products that you have, there's a change that needs to be introduced there. Well, who do you go to? Do you go to a data team that might know a little bit about what's going on and maybe what people are using it for, and now they need to make the decision? Or do you go to someone that intimately knows what that data is, how it's being used, and they say, yeah, we definitely need to add that in there, or no, that should be in another product. Let's explore in our catalog where there might be a better opportunity to put that data and get that to you. So it provides you that ability to do that. It also can include other key data, like if you have PII data for sensitive data, or you have to capture SLA information. I mentioned this in an earlier talk today around that in SLA. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So this catalog is essentially allowing you to have that inventory of everything so you can look at that.
What I think is
And
interesting about this approach, Alex, is that this creates the place where you have the information that's not in the actual pipelines.
yeah,
There's a lot of information here. Is it PII? Is it who's using it? Who's owning it? Right? That's all in this
right.
data catalog.
Yeah. Yeah. There's companies that, have solutions to do this because it can get very complicated. But we also say, there's also a simple way to do it, right? You can do it with a spreadsheet or some other tool that just captures some basic information to at least start it, right? And maybe if it gets more complicated and as you get more information around it, you might want to look at a tool to do it, but we don't think that might be necessary right out of the gate. So if we look at this, so what we have here is that in the far left column, I'll just kind of go column by column, right? We have the data product. What is that term that everyone's going to refer to this product as? And I just put two examples here, one about customer data, one about enterprise marketing, right? And then we have the data service. So now we're getting into the Ascend terminology. Okay, I put this part of this product into a data service, and then I have a data flow and pipeline related to it. So I can kind of start to see this and start to piece these together as we go forward. The data pipeline purpose, what is it? It's basic customer data pulled from source systems, essentially saying it's basic customer data that everybody uses. When I get to the stewards column, right, this is like, okay, we're pulling from two different sources for customers. We have some in Salesforce, we have some in HubSpot, and these are the two owners. So if you start to think about it, if people are going to say, I need to get additional customer information, if you have a chart like this and have the ability to do this, you don't just go to Juan who has the Salesforce and say, hey, can you look at adding this field and we want to start pulling it through this pipeline. You also have to make sure Sally's aware of this because she has to maybe make the same change in HubSpot, right? So it starts to make sure that as you get the data out of the data product, you don't all of a sudden start having holes like, well, this customer has this information, but this one doesn't. And you get confused and then the reporting's off. It's all those type of things that allow you to be able to make sure that you're really managing that data product. The core data flow, this is just something we put in there as an example. So a lot of times when you think about a catalog, there's like, I'm just making up a number. There's 5 or 6 like products that maybe everybody uses in the organization. There's no one owner for it. There's stewards that own pieces of making sure the data is there. But there's all this data that at the end of the data product, where you have the product that's being used, there's multiple people to use that. And when you have multiple people to use that, that means that might be considered, and this kind of goes into the concept I talked about in cost management, about how do you start to look at costs and how do you break those out? And that could potentially be something that says, you know what, we're going to consider this kind of a core data product. And we're going to make sure that way we break that out, the way we manage that is something that's centrally managed from a cost and budgeting perspective. So it's kind of trying to connect the different presentations together. Is this an interim product? What department? Again, this is just examples. Do you have PI data? Do you have an SLA? One of the things we mentioned in another presentation was about a lot of customers have SLAs for pipelines, but then you have a bunch that don't have SLAs. What we recommend is create an internal SLA. And you might want to have it like customer SLA or end user, consumer SLA, I guess is the right term. And then you might have internal SLA where you might actually create a different SLA internally, knowing that this has to be there by 7. So I want to make sure I manage this at 6:30 in the morning. Or they might not have one. You're saying, you know what, I need to look across all my pipelines and be able to manage all the things. So one that doesn't technically have a consumer SLA, I want to make sure one of the other ones doesn't impact that. So I can start to look across this and report on it and sort on it and do all those type of things. Now, the second row, maybe there's something specifically that the marketing team's doing, that they provide online ads targeting enterprise companies. Very specific. They're the only ones that are going to be using it, right? And they need it by a certain time, but I only need that at the end of the week to kind of see everything that's going on in the ads and what the results are. So they might have a different SLA, but they might be, when you start to look at how do you break out costs and how do you look at this, they might, get this bucket of kind of things that are specific to them.
Yeah, what I liked about that
Yeah.
before you wrap is
Yep.
I love where you're tying in the Ascend terminology, like what's happening in the intelligent data pipeline to the business needs and to the contract terms that we're spelling out here. And to your point, like there's sophisticated cataloging systems out there that do this, but you can actually keep it really simple to start. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's better than nothing, right? A lot of companies don't have anything and it makes it harder to manage that. Right. And then when you get the new pipeline that like, hey, now we have this new one, it has to be done at 7. All of a sudden it's a scramble. Like what are the SLAs, or running reports and out of the SDK, trying to figure out where everything goes and how long. This way you could at least say, okay, where do we start to negotiate? Maybe based on this, do we add more compute to make all these pipelines, or do we start to negotiate different timelines based on things? So again, it gives you some advantage to be able to more quickly address the needs of the business. So we're going to talk a little bit about what are the benefits of the catalog. So one of the key thing is discoverability of the products available, right? So it's just, if you make this public, the data team isn't this thing that's out there that's mysterious and things like that. This is really about, hey, we're going to show you everything we have, because you may not have to ask for it. You're just going to need access to the data. We already have it. So that becomes a big benefit to having something like this. They don't have to go into the tool and search around, things like that. Transparency across the organization, kind of linked to that. Discover it, but also make it available. Central location for all the key product data. Change request routing, like I mentioned, you have to change something about the customer, and now you know exactly who to talk to figure that out. Remove data team knowledge silos, right? I got to go talk to X because they know about this, and they know something because I know somebody that makes sure it's done by this time. Wait a minute, what happens if that person's out? What if they leave the company? What if they move departments? Now they're all of a sudden the owner of it forever, because there's nothing documented around that. Instead, someone moves to a different team. You look down and say, okay, they're owners of these. Who's going to own it going forward, right? You can have a transition. And then the last item there, engage data products as everyone's responsibility, not just the data team, right? So when I talk about data teams, I constantly say it's not just the data engineers, it's the analysts, it's the consumers of the data, it's the business, the entire business, right? Within the organization, both technology and business side are all one. And that is truly, in my opinion, your data team.
Awesome. Well, this has been really fun, Alex. Let's see if we have a couple of questions. Yep, we are in Q&A time.
Awesome.
Perfect. We have, I think, maybe one or two questions. So let's go ahead and start that off. You talked about a contract that defines the data product. Who are the parties to this contract?
Yeah, so I think actually Alex really put his finger on that, right? On the business side, these data stewards who help define the contract and know how that data product is going to be used. Sometimes there might be, a couple of people there for kind of joint custody of this data product. But the parties that we don't talk about here, that I think this is a great question, is the engineering team, right? The ones that are actually influenced by this data as a product mindset that now influences how they work. And they're totally party to those contracts, right? They actually need to agree to and set up this framework because they're going to deliver the actual data product. So yeah, thanks for putting that out. That's an important message.
Perfect. And then along those lines, you mentioned the data products having owners and stewards. So who should own the main data products that everyone uses?
Alex, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, let me think about this. Data products have owners or stewards. Who should own the main data product that everyone uses? I guess it depends, right? I mean, and this, Michael, add your opinion here, right? You have these interim products that lead to data products. To have a single person, I'm not sure. I guess it depends on your organization if you're going to assign someone to overall own that data product. Knowing though that some of those interim products go maybe into another product, it kind of gets a little bit complicated in those areas. But I think it might depend on what makes sense, and it might go one way and one another, where it's just multiple people versus one. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, Michael.
Yeah, I would hope that even these interim products have a business owner, like somebody who's in charge of weather forecasts, even though that may never show up in a report. But maybe some of those owners are actually in the engineering team. Yeah, I would not rule that out especially for this interim products. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. How do you see data products being exposed and packaged externally in data product marketplaces like monetization, et cetera?
Oh yeah. Right. I mean, there's a Snowflake, right? Everyone is putting up these data marketplaces, and they're actually, if you look at the data providers, large data providers in the financial services and the industry, really, they're selling data products. So the packaging of that, I would treat that just like any other data product, looking at who is accessing that data and what are they doing with it. I had a chance to talk with the folks at Komodo Health, and they package that data for their users. And they're very specific about what that looks like, right? In fact, they define it. Versus folks at another customer of ours, they have to package that data specifically for every one of their customers because they're big grocery chains. So they get to say. So that becomes part of your product definition. It's exactly how does it package and how do you deliver that? And sometimes you get to set the standard because you're big enough or you're creating a new product, or sometimes you just have to be super responsive to what your customer needs. Yeah.
All right. And I think one more question in this model, how does quality assurance play into the data product?
I want to point back to our data integrity session from yesterday. It's all about delivering trustworthy data and not to take away from data quality. In fact, all we've done is created a methodology by which you're using intelligent data pipelines to deliver trustworthy data to make confident decisions. And that really is the same objective of data quality anyway. So that framework kind of packages that up into a methodology to where you can actually implement that super simply using intelligent pipelines. So, yeah.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you, Michael and Alex, for your valuable insights. Always helpful. So we're sure the audience enjoyed your session as well.